It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when I met Lisa. At least, that's how it felt at the time. I wasn't expecting anything life-changing that day. I had just started a new job at a local marketing firm, and I was trying to get settled in. You know, the usual: meet some colleagues, grab lunch, and figure out the office dynamics. Lisa was a friend of a coworker, introduced to me casually at lunch. She was the kind of woman who made an impression without trying too hard: genuine smile, easy laugh, and a sense of calm that immediately drew me in. I noticed her from across the room when she sat down at the table. I thought she was beautiful, but it was more than just her looks. There was something about the way she spoke, the way she listened, that felt different. I don't know how to explain it. We talked about work, our favorite movies, and just some light conversation. But something about the way she carried herself, so comfortable in her skin, made me feel like I could trust her right away. By the end of lunch, I felt like I had made a real connection. I'd always been a bit of a skeptic when it came to love at first sight or any of that nonsense, but something about Lisa felt special. She wasn't like anyone I had met before. But as much as I was drawn to her, I couldn't shake a nagging feeling that I was missing something. She was too perfect, too composed. There had to be more to her story than she was letting on. I would soon find out just how true that was. It didn't take long for me to start noticing things that didn't quite add up. Our conversations flowed easily, but there was always something she would leave out, something she wouldn't talk about. Like when I asked about her plans for the weekend, she casually mentioned taking care of the kids but never really explained who they were or how old they were. It wasn't the kind of thing that felt appropriate to probe at the time, but my curiosity was piqued. I mean, how many kids does someone have, and why didn't she ever really bring them up? One day, I got my answer. I was walking out of the office when I saw Lisa talking to a guy in the parking lot. I didn't think much of it at first, maybe an old friend, I figured. But as I got closer, I saw them exchange a very intimate look, and I realized this wasn't just a casual acquaintance. They were too comfortable, too familiar. I felt this weird pang in my chest, like I had just witnessed something I wasn't supposed to. It was as if the world had shifted slightly and revealed a piece of the puzzle that I wasn't ready to see. As I walked past, she quickly pulled away and smiled awkwardly, giving me a half-hearted "Hey, I didn't see you there." Like she was trying to play it off. But I couldn't unsee it. There was something there, something I wasn't prepared for, and I had no idea how to handle it. A few days later, Lisa invited me to a small get-together at her place. It wasn't anything fancy, just a casual evening with a few friends and some wine. I was excited but, honestly, a little nervous. My curiosity was getting the best of me, and I needed answers. Why was she being so guarded? What was going on with her and that guy in the parking lot? I showed up a little early, and as I walked in, I was greeted by a couple of her friends. She introduced me to a few people, and everything seemed pretty normal at first. But then, the door swung open, and there they were, 3 kids. 2 boys, probably around 7 and 9, and a little girl, maybe 4 or 5. They burst in, laughing and running around the living room, shouting, "Mom, Mom." It hit me like a ton of bricks. I froze for a second. I don't know what I expected, maybe a clue or a hint here and there, but seeing them there, so casually, so present, threw me off completely. These weren't just kids. They were hers, and it was obvious they were a huge part of her life. Lisa smiled at me nervously as the kids came running toward her, and that's when she finally said it: "This is my family." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to ask more: who was the guy? Why hadn't she told me about them? But I just nodded, trying to play it cool, trying to process everything without letting my surprise show. It wasn't exactly a deal-breaker for me, but I couldn't help but feel a little blindsided. And then the questions started to build up in my mind. Who was the father of these kids? Was she married? Why didn't she tell me about them sooner? Was I just some distraction to her? My mind was racing, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was already in deeper than I'd expected. Later that evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Lisa and I found ourselves alone in the kitchen, sipping on wine and trying to make small talk. But there was an undeniable tension in the air. I could tell she knew something was off. I kept glancing at her, trying to figure out how to ask the questions that had been running through my mind since I walked through the door. She broke the silence first, her voice soft. "I guess you're wondering about the kids, huh?" I didn't know how to respond. I didn't want to seem too confrontational, but I also couldn't pretend I wasn't shocked. So, I just nodded. She sighed, setting her glass down on the counter. "I should have told you earlier. I wasn't sure where we were going, and I didn't want to scare you off." "Scare me off?" I asked, genuinely confused. "I mean, it's not that. I didn't know you had kids. I guess I just wasn't expecting it, you know?" Lisa looked down at her hands, as if she was weighing whether to tell me more. "Their father and I split up a couple of years ago. It's been complicated, to say the least." "And the guy you saw me with the other day? That's my ex. We're still figuring things out, but it's not exactly what you think." I took a deep breath. That was more than I expected. But I wasn't sure what to make of it. I wanted to ask more about the ex, about the situation, about where I fit into all of this, but I had to tread carefully. I couldn't just dive into all my concerns without understanding more of her side first. "I didn't mean to catch you off guard. I don't want to be misleading," she said, her voice a little shaky now. "I've been through a lot, and I didn't want anyone to pity me. Especially you." "Pity you?" "I'm not going to pity you," I replied, a bit more firmly than I intended. "But you've got to understand that this is a lot for me to process. You can't just drop that bomb on me and expect me to be okay with it right away." She nodded. "I get it. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have kept this from you for so long. I just didn't know how to tell you." The conversation that night didn't go as I thought it would. Part of me was relieved to hear the truth, but another part of me was angry at her for not telling me sooner, for making me feel like I was just a convenience in her life. I tried not to let it show, but the truth was, I was hurt. I felt blindsided and foolish. We had been talking for weeks, hanging out almost every day, and she never mentioned the kids or her complicated past. It didn't make sense to me, and I wasn't sure if I was angry at her or just at myself for getting involved without knowing the full picture. I spent the next couple of days in a haze of frustration and confusion. Every time I thought about it, the questions piled up in my head. Why hadn't she mentioned the kids? Was she just using me as a distraction? Was I being naive? The thing was, I really liked Lisa. Despite the unexpected bombshell, there was still something about her that drew me in. I wanted to believe in the connection we had, but now I was questioning everything. I couldn't help but wonder if I was just another chapter in her complicated life story. Was she really interested in me, or was I just filling a gap that her ex couldn't? I couldn't sleep. I couldn't focus at work. Every time I saw her, I felt that same mix of attraction and doubt, and I couldn't tell if it was something real or just the product of my own confusion. Then came the moment that pushed me over the edge. It happened a week after that conversation, and I honestly still can't believe it. Lisa had invited me over again, and this time, it was supposed to be different. She promised it would be just the two of us. I was still trying to figure things out, trying to process what I was feeling, and I thought, maybe if we just spent some quiet time together, I could get a better sense of where we stood. But when I arrived at her place, the front door was open, and I heard voices coming from inside. It wasn't just her voice, but the unmistakable sound of someone else talking, someone who sounded too familiar. I stepped inside, and there he was. The guy I'd seen her with in the parking lot, the ex. I froze. They were sitting on the couch, talking like old friends, laughing over something trivial. They didn't seem uncomfortable at all. In fact, it felt natural, like they had been doing this for years. I don't even know why I stayed. I should have turned around and left right then, but I didn't. I just stood there, my heart pounding in my chest, trying to understand what the hell was going on. Lisa saw me and immediately stood up, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Hey, I wasn't expecting you so soon," she said, her voice strained. This is Chris. My ex." Chris looked at me, his face casual but with a knowing smirk. "Nice to meet you, man," he said, like he'd known me for years. It was so weirdly familiar that I couldn't shake the sense that this was all part of some twisted joke I hadn't been clued into. Lisa gave him a look, almost like a signal. He stood up, stretching as if it were no big deal. "I should probably head out. I'll see you later, Lisa." And just like that, he was gone, without a second thought. I stood there, completely stunned, not knowing what to say. Lisa was still standing near the door, not meeting my eyes. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice a little sharper than I intended. "Why is he here? I thought you said it was just the two of us tonight?" She took a deep breath. "It's complicated, okay? We're still figuring things out. We co-parent. It's not as simple as you might think." I didn't know what to feel at that moment. Anger, confusion, disappointment, all of it mixed together in a blur. "You didn't think to mention that again?" I said, frustration bubbling up. "That you and your ex are just hanging out? And I'm supposed to be okay with this?" Lisa's eyes welled up, and she looked down, clearly upset. "I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want to make things more complicated than they already are. I thought we could just enjoy our time together without all the baggage." I didn't know what to say after that. My stomach churned, and I felt like I was about to break into pieces. I had tried to keep an open mind, but now, everything felt like a lie. This wasn't just some complicated past she had, it was an ongoing reality I was expected to accept without warning. I left her apartment that night feeling like my whole world had been flipped upside down. I walked around aimlessly, not really sure where I was going or what I was doing. All I knew was that I was angry, confused, and hurt. It wasn't just the fact that she'd kept so much from me, it was the way I felt manipulated, like I was just a temporary distraction in a much bigger, much more complicated mess that I didn't sign up for. I spent the night tossing and turning, my mind racing with thoughts. What was I supposed to do now? I had been drawn in, emotionally invested, and now I was stuck. Did I even want to continue this? How could I trust her when it felt like every step forward revealed more secrets? And what about the kids? I hadn't signed up for a ready-made family with baggage that seemed to weigh more than I could handle. The next day, I texted Lisa. I didn't want to do this over the phone or in person. I needed space to think and figure out what I wanted, and I didn't want to say anything in the heat of the moment that I might regret. "I need some time to think about everything," I wrote. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore, Lisa. This is just too much for me right now." It wasn't a breakup, but it felt like it might be heading that way. I knew I needed distance, but part of me still wanted to see where things could go, wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. But how could I move forward without knowing the truth? Without feeling like I was just another piece in someone else's puzzle? Lisa responded quickly. "I understand," she said. "I didn't mean to hurt you. Take all the time you need. I don't want to lose you." I stared at her message for a long time, feeling torn. I could feel my heart wanting to say, "It's okay, let's work through this," but my head kept reminding me of everything that didn't add up. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do next. But something in me knew I couldn't keep going like this. I needed answers. I needed to know if I was truly in this with her, or if I was just a bystander in a drama that was already too messy for me to handle. I spent the next few days in total silence. No calls, no texts. I needed the space to sort through everything that had happened. I kept replaying the events over and over in my mind, trying to make sense of it all. Was I being unreasonable? Was I overreacting? I knew I had to decide if I was willing to take on all of this, the kids, the ex, the complicated history, or if it was something I just wasn't ready for. To be honest, the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I didn't have a clear picture of what my life with Lisa would even look like. I didn't know if I could be a part of something where the past was always lingering in the background. And every time I thought about her ex, Chris, I felt a knot in my stomach. That guy was always going to be there, no matter what. After a few days of reflecting, I knew I couldn't keep avoiding her. But I still wasn't sure what I wanted. Did I want to put in the effort to make this work? Or was I simply trying to salvage something that was never going to be what I hoped for? I texted Lisa again, telling her I wanted to talk. She agreed to meet up at a cafe later that afternoon, and my heart was pounding as I drove there. I wasn't sure what would happen, but I knew the conversation was overdue. It was time to get real. When I saw her, my stomach twisted. Lisa was sitting at a table by the window, nervously twirling a strand of her hair. She looked like she hadn't slept much, and I could see the tension in her shoulders. I sat down across from her and, for a moment, we both just stared at each other, neither of us knowing where to begin. "Listen," she started, breaking the silence, "I'm not asking you to take on my life." Tavaja Slova. Next. ChatGPT Povdal. Part 8, The Heart to Heart. After a few days of reflection, I called Lisa. We hadn't spoken since the night with her ex, and honestly, I was still feeling torn. My emotions were all over the place, but I knew I had to face it head-on if I wanted to make sense of everything. We decided to meet at a park, somewhere neutral where we could talk without distractions. I had no idea how this conversation would go, but I knew it was now or never. I couldn't keep circling around my feelings and questioning everything. I needed clarity, and I needed to hear it from her. Lisa was already sitting on a bench when I arrived, her hands folded in her lap, eyes downcast. She looked vulnerable. I hadn't seen her like this before. It made my heart ache a little, but I was still frustrated. I wanted answers, not excuses. We sat in silence for a moment, just taking in the quiet surroundings. I could feel the weight of the conversation hanging in the air, but neither of us knew how to start. Finally, I broke the silence. "Lisa, I don't know what to think anymore. I care about you, I really do, but you've got to understand how all of this is hitting me. The kids, the ex, the way you've kept everything hidden. It feels like I've been kept in the dark." She nodded slowly, taking a deep breath before speaking. "I get it. I do. And I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you feel like this. The truth is, I've been afraid. Afraid that if I told you about my kids, about everything with Chris, you wouldn't stick around. It's not easy being a single mom, and I've always had to protect myself. I didn't want you to think I was some burden." "Burden?" I repeated, a little taken aback. "I never thought that. But you did hide things. You kept me in the dark, Lisa, and I don't know how to just brush that off." She looked down, her voice quiet. "I know. And I'm sorry. I didn't want to drag you into all the drama. I wasn't even sure where we were heading, to be honest. I liked you, no, I really liked you. But I was terrified that you'd see all my baggage and walk away." It was hard to stay angry at her when she was this open, this vulnerable. But at the same time, it didn't change the fact that I felt hurt and confused. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to take her words at face value or if this was just part of the pattern she had built over the years. "I get that," I said, trying to soften my tone. "But it's not just about the kids or your ex. It's about trust. If I'm going to be involved with you, I need to know I'm not just someone you're hiding from your life. And you've got to understand, it's not just about me, these are real people, your kids, and I can't just walk into that without understanding what I'm getting into." She nodded, her eyes starting to tear up. "I get it. I really do. I just didn't want to scare you off." I could see she was genuinely upset. I felt bad for her, but I also couldn't ignore the fact that I had been in the dark for too long. She wasn't the only one with fears. I was scared, too scared that I had invested too much in someone who wasn't fully open with me, scared that I would end up getting hurt. As we sat there on that park bench, something shifted in the air. It was like I could finally see the weight she had been carrying all this time. The walls were coming down, but so were mine. For the first time in days, I didn't feel like I was just trying to manage my emotions, I was ready to listen, really listen to what Lisa had to say. "I should have been honest with you from the beginning," Lisa said, her voice trembling a little. "It's just, everything with Chris, the kids, the mess of it all, sometimes I feel like I'm juggling a million things and I'm afraid I'll drop them. I didn't know how to bring you into all of that. I looked at her, my anger fading, but a sense of sadness taking its place. It's not about how messy your life is, Lisa. It's about feeling like you weren't even giving me a chance to be a part of it. I thought we were building something, but you were keeping pieces of yourself from me. She wiped her eyes, taking a deep breath. I know. And I was wrong. I didn't mean to make you feel like you didn't matter. You do. You do matter. But it's so hard to balance everything. It's hard to know who to trust with all of it. I'd been burned before, and I guess I didn't want to risk being vulnerable again. That stung. I wasn't sure if it was her way of telling me she wasn't ready, or if she was genuinely apologizing. But I was done with the confusion. I had to know what this was, once and for all. So, what does this mean for us? I asked, my voice steady but uncertain. Do you want this to work, or am I just someone else to pass the time with until things get less complicated? Her eyes met mine, filled with sincerity. I want this to work, she said softly. I'm not trying to just keep you in limbo. I want to figure this out with you. But I need you to understand, it won't be easy. The kids, the co-parenting, everything with Chris, it's a package deal. I can't just turn it off, and I don't expect you to either. That was the turning point. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was the one I needed. This wasn't going to be some fairy tale where everything magically falls into place. This was going to be hard, messy, and full of compromises I hadn't even begun to think about. I took a deep breath and nodded. I'm willing to try. But I need to know that I'm not just a convenience to you. I need to know that you're in this as much as I am. I am, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I promise. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable, it was full of understanding. But as I looked at Lisa, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't going to be simple. It wasn't going to be easy. But I wasn't ready to walk away. Not yet. A few weeks passed after our heart-to-heart, and things started to feel better. Sort of. Lisa was being more open, and we spent more time together, but there was still a lot of uncertainty hanging over us. I was still learning how to navigate this world of kids, co-parenting, and her complicated history with Chris. It felt like every time I thought I was making progress, something else would come up, reminding me how much there was still to figure out. The real test came one Saturday afternoon when Lisa asked if I could come over to help with something at her place. I was hesitant at first, I wasn't sure if this was a test or just a chance for us to hang out in a more casual setting, but she insisted, so I agreed. When I arrived, Lisa was in the kitchen, her hands full with the kids, who, by the way, were wild that day. It felt like they were bouncing off the walls. I could barely hear myself think, and I was immediately thrust into this chaotic family dynamic I wasn't fully prepared for. Hey, there's a lot to do before Chris picks up the kids later, Lisa said as she handed me a stack of laundry. I was hoping you could help me fold this while I finish making lunch. The kids are, well, you know how they are. I was trying to hold it together, but the pressure was on. I had no idea how to fold kids' clothes. Was I supposed to fold them the way Lisa would, or just do it however? I glanced at the kids, who were running around, completely ignoring me. It felt a bit like I was intruding. Like, who was I in this scenario? Just a guy who showed up out of nowhere, trying to fit into this tight-knit family system? As I sat there, folding clothes that didn't make any sense to me, I heard Lisa talking to one of the kids in the other room. Sweetie, you need to eat your lunch, she said in a firm but loving tone. Chris will be here soon to pick you up, and I want you to be ready. Chris. The mention of his name hit me like a brick. The last time I saw him, he had walked out of her apartment without a second glance, like it was no big deal. But now, I was beginning to realize how much of an active role he still played in her life. I could feel a knot tightening in my chest. How was I supposed to deal with this? How could I fit in when her ex was still very much in the picture? Before I could overthink it too much, Lisa came back into the room, looking apologetic. Sorry, I didn't mean to leave you hanging with the laundry. How's it going? I tried to smile and pretend everything was fine, but I could feel my insecurities creeping in. It's fine, I said, trying to keep my voice casual. It's just a lot to take in, you know? Lisa took a step closer to me, her expression softening. I know it's overwhelming. I'm trying to make this work with you, but I also need to be here for the kids. For Chris. It's a balancing act that I've been doing for a while now, and I know it's not fair to expect you to just understand all of it overnight. I nodded, appreciating her honesty. But the truth was, I was beginning to feel like I was standing on the sidelines, watching a family that wasn't mine. I was trying to jump in, but it felt like no matter how much I tried, I was always going to be the outsider. The days that followed were a blur of highs and lows. There were moments when I thought I could actually get used to this life. I'd get a glimpse of the family dynamic, the laughter, and the chaotic, warm atmosphere, and it made me feel connected. I could see why Lisa was so protective of it all. This was her world, her life, and her responsibility. But there were other moments, like that Saturday, when I felt completely lost. I wasn't just adjusting to her kids or her ex. I was trying to figure out where I fit in the bigger picture. What role was I playing in this? Was I a potential stepdad? Just a boyfriend? Or was I merely someone who would always be a temporary guest in their lives? The doubts continued to bubble up. I tried talking to Lisa about it, but every time I brought it up, she'd reassure me that everything would get easier. That it just took time. Time, I thought. It had been a few weeks, but I still didn't feel like I was getting any closer to understanding my place in her life. And then, one evening, just when I thought things might be getting back on track, it all came to a head. I was sitting on her couch, scrolling through my phone, when she walked in. She looked stressed, like something was weighing on her mind. Hey, I think I need to tell you something, she said, sitting down next to me. Her tone was serious, and immediately, my stomach dropped. It was like I could feel the shift in the air, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for whatever was coming next. I looked up, trying to mask my nerves with a half-smile. What's up? Lisa took a deep breath. It's about Chris, she started, her eyes avoiding mine. I don't want you to freak out, but he and I had a conversation. About the kids. And he made it clear that he wants to have more control over how things go. He's been pressuring me to let him take on more responsibility, like, more than we originally agreed on. I could feel my heart pounding. Wait, what? What do you mean by more control? Are you saying he wants more involvement than you planned for? Lisa nodded. He does. And the thing is, he has a point. I can't keep doing everything by myself. But I also don't want you to think that I'm just going to drop everything for him. I'm trying to find a balance. But it's hard. I sat there, stunned, processing what she was saying. Of course Chris would want more control. Of course he'd want to step back in and make his voice heard in the decision-making process. But I wasn't prepared for this. I hadn't signed up for being the guy on the sidelines while Lisa navigated her complicated co-parenting arrangement. You're telling me this now? I asked, my voice a little shaky. I mean, I thought we were starting to figure things out. You've been telling me that it's just you and me, and now it's like you're telling me I'm just a piece of the puzzle that doesn't matter. Lisa's face softened, and she reached for my hand. No, that's not what I meant. But I need you to understand, I have responsibilities that go beyond just us. The kids, Chris, the whole co-parenting thing. It's not something I can shut off. I can't just make it go away. I wanted to understand. I really did. But the truth was, I felt like I was being pulled in 1,000 directions, none of which had anything to do with me. It was like I was caught in a tug-of-war between her past and the future I thought we could have. The weeks that followed felt like a whirlwind of ups and downs. Lisa and I continued to grow together, learning about each other, facing new challenges, and slowly but surely carving out our space in this chaotic new world. It wasn't always smooth sailing, but it felt like we were finally getting somewhere. The tension between Chris and me was still there, but it was manageable, if not something I could entirely ignore. Lisa was trying to find her balance too, and I could see her making an effort to include me more in her life, not just as a boyfriend, but as someone who could contribute to the family dynamic. But the biggest change wasn't about Chris or the kids. It was about me. I had to learn how to step back and let things unfold, not force them. I couldn't control everything, and I had to stop trying to fit myself into a mold that didn't quite fit. I had to figure out what I truly wanted from this relationship and what I was willing to accept. One afternoon, a few months after that weekend, Lisa and I sat down together for one of our usual heart-to-hearts. The kids were at their dad's house for the weekend, and we had some time to ourselves. "I've been thinking a lot about everything," I said, feeling nervous but sure of what I needed to say. "About us. About the kids. About Chris. And I think I'm finally starting to understand my place in all of this." Lisa looked at me, her expression open and curious. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm learning to accept that this isn't just about us. It's about your whole life, and I'm a part of it, but I'm not the center of it. And that's okay. I can't pretend that it's always easy, but I think I'm finally seeing the bigger picture." I paused, letting the words sink in. I've learned that I can't just fit into this perfect idea of what I thought this would be. It's messier than that, and I have to be okay with that. Lisa smiled softly, her eyes full of warmth. "You don't have to be perfect, you know. I don't expect you to have all the answers. I don't either. But I'm so glad you're here. I'm glad you're in this with me." And in that moment, I realized something important. This wasn't about fitting into some ideal. It wasn't about being the perfect partner or the perfect stepdad. It was about showing up, consistently, imperfectly, and being willing to figure it out as we went along. The messiness, the ups and downs, the unexpected moments, all of it was part of what made us who we were. And that was enough. So, what would I say to anyone in a similar situation? Honestly, it's simple: be patient with yourself. Be patient with the other person. It's okay not to have all the answers right away. You don't have to be perfect, and neither does the person you're with. Relationships are messy, especially when kids and exes are involved, but that doesn't mean they aren't worth it. If you care enough to stick it out, it can lead to something beautiful. But only if you're willing to show up, be vulnerable, and accept that things will never go according to plan.